welcome back. Oh, sorry. Welcome back to another video. I'm sorry, by the way, if the lighting is weird in this video, but it's like basically nighttime outside because it's so cloudy, and I am using like artificial lights, and I don't know what to tell you. That's it. Okay. Oh my gosh. Jeez Louise. Okay. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Olga. I am 26 and I live with fibromyalgia, chronic migraines, IBS, and then other minor stuff. So I am going to be talking about my chronic migraines today. Mostly, where's my list? I always have a list. Mostly, I'm going to be talking about my triggers, and so what triggers my migraines, and how that kind of makes my life different, or like the impact that that has on my life to some extent. I'm sure some of them are like super common, others I don't know, but I'm pretty sure most of them are pretty common, or I think they're common, maybe they're not, I don't know. But yeah, I just kind of want to talk about a little bit how they impact my life. And I know that a lot of people who also suffer with chronic migraines will also experience this and will already know this, so this is no new information for you if you have this. So if you do, it's going to be more like a, yeah, I totally relate to that kind of situation. But if you don't, then it's something that maybe you can educate yourself on how this affects our lives, and how this is like something, like it's a condition that you have to manage like all the time. And most of chronic conditions you have to manage all the time. But yeah, I think pain conditions can be really frustrating. You have to work so hard to manage them so that you're not in excruciating pain. Even still, with all of the things you'll do to manage your conditions, you will still get flare-ups, and you will still have like worsening of your symptoms sometimes. And it's so frustrating when that happens, because like you could be doing everything right and still stuff can go wrong. But also it can be really frustrating just to have to do all of these things to get by. Sometimes I will try to avoid these triggers, and other times, sorry, my ear is ringing really loud. And other times I will do what I want to do, because otherwise I'm gonna go insane. And so balance, I guess. So let's get into it. The first thing that I have here on my list is dehydration. This is pretty obvious. We all know that if we're very thirsty, it can give us a headache. In my case, it's going to be more than a headache. With my chronic migraines, I don't know if you're aware of this, but basically what I feel, what I experience is that I constantly have a headache, and then when I have like a flare-up, I have like a migraine that's really bad. So that means that like right now I have a headache every day, all the time, constantly I have a headache. And then on some days, like some days it's worse, some days it's better. There will be like days where for some reason, either my triggers or just because my brain feels like it, I will get really bad pain to the point where I can't leave my bed. And then I will have to just lay there like a vegetable and wait for the pain to go away, kind of thing. So that's what I mean with like a migraine. I use those two terms differently to like differentiate between like my bad days and my good days, or like my not so bad days. But I am aware that basically if you have chronic migraines, it means that you are constantly having a migraine. It's just when it's a headache, it's just not as bad. So dehydration, obviously. So what I do to try to combat that is I try to drink like about 1.5 liters of water every day. Sometimes I can make it, sometimes I drink more, sometimes I drink a little bit less. It depends on the day. I do try to like be conscious of that, but some days I forget. It can be kind of annoying because it means that I oftentimes have to carry water with me. So another trigger that I have is lack of sleep. So if I don't sleep well, if I'm just having bad sleep and not restful sleep, I will get worsening of my symptoms. Good sleep hygiene, I guess, is what helps with this, but it's really hard because people with fibromyalgia, which is the other condition that I have a really hard time sleeping well. So we're notoriously, I was going to say bad sleepers. It's part of the condition. So I try my best to have like good sleep hygiene, which means having to go to bed and waking up at the same time every day, even if that means that some days I want to stay up and I want to hang out with my friends, or I want to hang out with my boyfriend, or I want to hang out with my parents or with my dog, or I want to stay in bed a little bit later. But I have to decide whether or not it is worth the risk of getting a migraine. Another one that I have is fatigue. So if I am in a fatigue flare, if I'm like been working myself too hard, if I like exercise too much, or if I like push myself too much in a situation, yeah, and I get bad fatigue, normally that comes with a headache on top of the fatigue, which is really adding insult to injury in my opinion. I obviously try to avoid fatigue flares because of the obvious reasons, that right, we try to not overdo it, but it can be difficult because sometimes you don't realize that you're overdoing it. Other times you want to not have that weight because you just want to like do things that you enjoy without worrying about flares. And sometimes you like definitely need to do that thing, travel for a specific reason, or go to that appointment that's really stressful and is really going to tucker you out, or like do that thing. And it's really annoying when your fatigue induces another flare, another migraine flare, because it's like, you can't win. I try to avoid fatigue flares. I think I'm doing okay. Right now, worse than normal, because, you know, the whole world is topsy-turvy. Next on my list is too much sleep, because yes, too little sleep and also too much sleep are both triggers for me. I don't know if this is the same for you, but if I sleep too much, I also can trigger migraine. Normally, I find that sleeping too much is a bigger trigger than sleeping too little. It also happens sometimes if I take like extra pain meds, like if I'm having a bad pain flare or whatever, I'll take extra pain meds, which make me sleepier and means that I sleep longer. And yeah, that can also trigger a migraine sometimes. Not all the time, just sometimes, which is another annoying thing of my triggers, is that they're not always the same. Like sometimes I won't drink water for the whole day and I won't get a migraine. And other times I will drink water the whole day and I will get a migraine. And it's just like, why? What are you doing? And following up on the meds thing, another thing on my list is if I forget to take my meds properly. So if I don't take my medication like I'm supposed to, which is like at specific times and like, you know, how I'm supposed to take it, yeah, that normally triggers a migraine. I've actually changed medications a little bit, so I'm not feeling this as bad right now, particularly when I'm on something that is like slow release that I have to take like at 7 or 8 p.m. If I forget to take it at 7 or 8 p.m., which happens very frequently, I will take it like when I remember, which most of the time is before I go to bed. So normally when I wake up, I am like super groggy and out of it, and either I have to go back to sleep, which too much sleep, migraine, or I have to like try to snap out of it, and that normally is really hard and makes my brain so tired and laggy, which migraine. So it's really ironic when your migraine medication not taken properly can cause migraines. And next on my list is the sun or the heat. So I live in Portugal, which is not the hottest country in the world, but also definitely not the coolest. We have pretty hot summers, particularly now with global warming, and I live in a city where, I wanted to say that doesn't sleep because, you know, New York. I live in a city which is actually really like stuffy, so I find that it's very hot here, like it's like a stuffy heat. Anyway, so it gets like to the 30-40 degree Celsius range like very easily in the summer. And it gets so hot, and I feel like because of my fibromyalgia, like my body overheats very easily, and when I overheat, I get a migraine. So I have to be super careful with like sun exposure and like heat exposure. I have to make sure I'm drinking like tons and tons of water if I'm out in the sun. I always wear a hat when I'm outside in the sun. So if it's sunny in the summer, I'm always wearing a hat like 100% of the time. Normally a wide brim, but if I don't have like my wide brim hat with me, I will wear whatever I have on hand. And in the winter, I also tend to wear hats if it's sunny, but I'll wear like wool hats and stuff like that, like, and make it cute because we get a lot of sunny days in the winter. And if it's sunny and I'm gonna be outside for a while, I have to wear a hat because having like the sun on my head just gives me migraines. I don't know. It can be really annoying because when you're with people and you start to feel like you're overheating and like this is gonna start happening, it can be really annoying to be like, I have to go home now because I'm getting too hot. And sometimes people don't understand that it's not because you don't want to be there. You do. Like, I love being at the beach. Like, I love going to the beach. Sometimes I don't want to be outside because it's so much work to not get repercussions that it's just easier not to do it. And that can be really frustrating because it really limits your life. Next is when the weather changes. So when we have big changes in the weather, obviously, that can have an effect, and that can sometimes cause migraines. More so when we go from the winter to the summer, I notice straight away that I get more migraines. It does also happen the other way around, a little bit less though, because I just am a little bit lucky like that. At least it doesn't happen both ways. Another really obvious one is well, my hamster's out to say hi. Another really obvious one is stress and anxiety. I feel like those are obvious, and they're like factors in worsening of symptoms and flares for, I think, pretty much every condition ever. Like stress and anxiety is something that's going to aggravate whatever symptoms you're experiencing, because it just makes your body like more unwell, I guess. So I find that whenever I'm having periods of anxiety and stress, and I'm just not doing well with my like anxiety management, and I'm just like not doing well with my like depression management and all that stuff, I will have more migraines. Case in point, this whole pandemic thing, it's been hard on my body because so many changes, so much stress, so much unknown, so much anxiety, so much fear. Not to be a bummer, but it's a scary time. So it's normal if you or me or all of us are just like not being able to manage our symptoms that well, because we're under more stress than usual. And it's okay if you don't know how to manage that stress, because like this has not happened before. Not only is this whole thing stressful, but also a lot of things that we normally do to manage our conditions we can't do. Like I can't go to water aerobics, I can't go on my walks, like I can't do a bunch of stuff. So like obviously my pain's going to be higher, obviously like a bunch of stuff, you know? And if your mental health is not doing so well, obviously everything else is going to suffer in going to be repercussions. Are we really going to have a run on the wheel right now, bud? Yeah, I'm sorry if it starts to squeak, but my hamster is just like such a trooper for his wheel, and like it's the best thing in his life, and I cannot take that away because it's a really old hamster. If it's like squeaky and noisy, he's just hanging out. I'm sorry. Okay, as I was saying, it's a stressful time. So I've been having more migraines. I had an appointment with my doctor like 2 weeks ago where we changed my medication and stuff, and we did it all virtually, which was pretty cool. Also, it's like a lot less stressful to have to do your appointments virtually because you don't have to go to the hospital. So we had that and we talked about it, and I said like I'm 100% sure that the migraines that I'm having right now are anxiety induced, and I don't know if the other ones that I have are or not. I'm sure that it's a factor, but I can't tell you like 3 months ago on that day if I was stressed or not. But I can tell you today that like yesterday I had a migraine, and it was because I'm stressed out because I went to sleep the night before crying about like the thought that I might lose one of my friends. So like I am 100% sure it's about that. That's something, and that it's something that I'm having a hard time managing and like kind of living with. So I'm trying to do what I can and like live every day the best way that I can and do things that make me happy and stuff, but it's hard. Next on my list is pain flares. Obviously, not obviously, I don't know. Pain flares, migraines. I don't know how that's connected, but it is. Whenever I have pain flares, I also sometimes have migraine flares. I think it's kind of the like, not the like suffering. I don't know. I think it might also be like the medication that I have to take, or the lack of my schedule, the lack of like movement, and the lack of like following the patterns of my day. I don't know, that's just my guess, but that's just something. It's also one of those that I'm not that bothered about, because like if I'm having a pain flare and I get a migraine, I'm kind of like, we're already there, so it hurts here, it hurts there, like it doesn't really make a difference at this point, so I'm kind of like whatever. Next on my list is noise. I think it's also to do a little bit with fibromyalgia and the fact that we have a lot of like sensitivity to stimulus. So I have very much a lot of light sensitivity, and also I feel like I have a lot of sound sensitivity. I find that certain noises and certain sounds just hurt my brain. And when I hear certain sounds, those can trigger a migraine, but it's more like, it's not just like a specific sound, like a siren, for example. That's not a trigger of mine, but like feel like mostly it's it being exposed to a lot of noise and like loud noises in a place that is noisy. That is something that I find triggering more so than like a specific noise. So like going to a restaurant can be really bad for me because I just find that I just struggle with the noise. I think it's also to do with a lot of input and a lot of like bombarding my brain with a lot of input because, again, fibromyalgia brains, we don't have a filter that filters out unnecessary information. So our brain just takes all of the stimulus that our body gathers. So your visual, your body, like your senses, your hearing, your everything, smell, everything, you pick everything up, and then normally your brain would filter out whatever is irrelevant. So like in a restaurant, you would filter out whatever the conversation of the person next to you so you can hear what the person in front of you is saying. Whereas what our brains with fibromyalgia do is they don't do that. So you can hear the person next to you and the other person and that person over there and the person in front of you. And what happens is you can hear all of them, and then that means you can hear none of them because you can't make out any of the information because it's just bombarding you all of it at the same time, and you have to work really hard to manually do that, to manually like filter out what is not necessary, and that can be exhausting, and I find that triggering for my migraines. So I don't know if it's necessarily the noise or just like being in a chaotic environment, because I also wrote down chaotic environments. I find like going to shows, going to like the cinema, things like that can be really triggering. Places with a lot of lights or like really bright lights. Sometimes even when I wake up and I open the blinds and I look outside to see what the weather is like, it feels like my eyes get stabbed, and that can sometimes trigger a headache or a migraine. Being on screens for too long, things like that. I have a bunch of like apps and things set up on my laptop and my phone and even my like Nintendo Switch. I have everything set up with the lowest brightness that I possibly can. My TV, everything, so that I have like settings for when I have migraines or for when I have bad headaches. So I have all of this stuff set up so that it minimizes the amount of headaches and migraines that I get, and also when I have a migraine I can still like barely use it, kind of thing. So yeah, lights and screens, that can be a huge trigger, which is annoying when you work from home on a computer and you like edit videos and you know have run an Etsy shop, and it can be annoying and difficult. Like I said, create chaotic environments. I feel like that's because of the informational input and the like cognitive, I want to say like cognitive dysfunction, but like really is the amount of work I'm asking of my brain to do. And then I have one which is funny, but like not really. And it's crying. Like if I'm watching a movie or somebody shows me a video or I watch the news and I cry about something, that can often, even if it's like happy tears, if somebody gives me a gift that I love and I cry, like that can trigger a migraine. So it really doesn't help that I'm like super sentimental and wear my heart on my sleeve. Another one is not eating properly. So if I don't have like enough meals, I'm just not eating very well, not eating enough or not eating well, or I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. That can trigger migraines. Sometimes I just don't have the energy to like go through like my ingredients and all that stuff. Like sometimes I just don't have the energy. I don't know how to explain this better. It's the fatigue thing. One thing snowballs into another, which is a really big problem, I feel like. I think sometimes the biggest struggle with dealing with multiple chronic illnesses that interact is that sometimes you're like managing the worst one. Most of the time you're managing the worst one, but you're managing most of them at the same time. And then one of them will like flare and you're like, oh my God, okay. And you have to kind of drop everything else to focus on that one thing that is causing havoc right now. And that can mean that the other things get out of control, and then you have to be putting out fires everywhere. I find that that's a really difficult challenge of managing multiple illnesses, is that you sometimes have to drop everything and focus on one thing, but if you drop everything, then everything, all of those things that you dropped are gonna come back to bite you hard. Another thing that I tend to do is overwork myself. I think this goes hand in hand with like fatigue, being too on screens for too long, but like I love, you guys know I love making stuff, I love crafting, I love like sewing, embroidering, I like doing housework, which is weird, I know, but I like doing it. I like cooking, I like baking, so I find that like on any given day, I'm always working, like I'm always doing something, because if I'm not working like on my work, I'm doing a YouTube video, or I'm working for my Etsy shop, or I'm making something for me or for my sister or for my boyfriend or for my mom, or I'm baking or I'm cooking, or I'm like using leftovers, or I'm like putting stuff away, or I'm cleaning or whatever. Whenever I have fatigue days, I can't do anything and then I feel terrible, so I have to like overcompensate on good days, and then I have this cycle which is terrible. I'm trying to break it, but it happens. And yeah, I'm just like one of those people who like likes doing. I just have a hard time sitting down and like not doing anything. Like I have to be doing something. Yeah, I kind of struggle with that, and I like overwork myself, and that normally tends to flaring of some sort. The last thing on my list is like not following my schedule and not keeping up with my sleep hygiene. These two are really important, like I mentioned earlier. Like having a really nice structure and routine is really good for our brains. It gets us used to like resting at the right times, and like our brains are really fans of structure and patterns. But what happens sometimes is, like I said, when you have to put that aside to attend to other symptoms, then that can be difficult to like get back to, because there's always something pulling you away. And I find that some good sleep hygiene is a really important thing for my migraines, because like I said, too much sleep or too little sleep are both triggers. So it's really important to have like the right amount of sleep and have good sleep hygiene. And I found that when I was practicing that and it was starting to work, it really did work. And I found that I was sleeping better, and like my sleep was more restful and like just better quality sleep. And I felt more rested, I felt more like, and I felt better during the day. If I'm following it, yeah, it's helping and I can kind of live like a normal person, almost. But as soon as I have any kind of setback of any sort, it completely like derails, and I have such a hard time getting back to it. I have such a hard time like finding that place again and getting those benefits again. And it's really frustrating that some things are out of your control and your other symptoms flare for reasons that you can't control. Like today is raining and so my pain's worse. Like I can't control that, you know what I mean? Like it's just such an annoying cycle, and it's just so frustrating. And I feel like people don't appreciate that. Yeah, okay, you can do all of these things to help you with your migraines, sure, and they do help, but also it's so difficult to uphold because of all of the other things that intersect with that, you know what I mean? What I'm trying to get to is that yes, there are these things that can help, but also I feel like people don't appreciate how hard it is that you have to constantly be almost like a slave to those rituals and to those routines and to those treatments, and you have to follow them like religiously, or else you're gonna go back to feeling horrible. And I feel like people just don't appreciate how hard it is to feel better at the expense of all of these, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, yes, I want to feel better, and yes, I want to do all these things that make me feel better, and yes, it's a small sacrifice to pay for not being in pain all the time, but I feel like sometimes people don't appreciate how hard it is to keep up with those little rituals and those little routines that are not so little and that take up a huge chunk of your day, and that you have to plan around, and that you have to constantly keep in mind, and that constantly reminds you that you're sick, and that that if you don't do this, you're gonna get sick again, or you're gonna get worse again. And it can be really difficult to live with that like cloud hanging over your head. I don't know, that's kind of how I feel sometimes. Not all the time. Just because I'm talking about this doesn't mean that this is how I feel 100% of the time. Nothing that I show on camera is how I feel 100% of the time, because I'm not a robot. I feel different things at different times. So yeah, I feel like we have to understand that we need to talk about the like bad parts of illness and chronic illness as well, to kind of understand like the costs that it has on people. And it's okay that it's hard, and it doesn't mean that we can't be happy. It doesn't mean that we can't, you know, enjoy our lives, and it doesn't mean that, you know, it has to be the hardest thing ever all the time. I think it's normal that it's harder right now to manage our symptoms, and that's okay. So yeah, don't beat yourself up about it if you're going through this as well. So yeah, that's it for this video. If you did enjoy it, please don't forget to leave it a like and a comment, and consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. That would mean so much to me. Also consider ringing the notification bell, because that will let you know whenever I post a video, because I tend to not post regularly because of, like I said a million times in this video, migraines. That's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Stay safe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!